Hello, Scream Demons, and welcome to the Screams from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey. Hey, I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm Casey. Join with me.
Sam.
That's Sam. He's my co-host on this.
It's off to a great start.
We're on fire.
We're on fire. I had a brain fart on the intro for this, but
that's okay.
We're gonna have a good intro. We're gonna have a good episode. We're gonna have a fun time because we are joined by. I think Doug might be our second returning guest to the show ever, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Second returning guest. Yeah. We don't have many returning guests. Doug, you're in an elite class.
Awesome. Well, I survived the first one, so
yeah.
It's like the 5-timers club on SNL, except it's just apparently now just the 2-timers club.
Just
on
the
two. You don't get anything cool, but you just get a shout out. That's it.
I was gonna say a jacket or something. Severed head. Yeah, one of the.
Ooh, that's not a bad idea. We should start doing that.
We should start sending severed heads in the mail.
Yeah.
And make sure to mark it really clearly. Severed head. Yeah.
Yep.
Tattoo our logo on the forehead of it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's just a nice trinket. Yeah.
We'll send a copy of 7 with the severed head, so everybody knows what we're doing. That's the other voice you're hearing besides myself and Sam is our returning guest to the show, founder, CEO of Bad Hand Books. That's what we're talking about today on this podcast. Doug Murano, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you. I'm really honored to be one of the few returning guests that you've had so far. Had a great time last time, and I love what you're doing, and got a lot of exciting things happening at Bad Hand. So I'm really pleased to be here with you, and just can't thank you enough for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Doug, we love what you're doing with Bad Hand. So yeah, the feeling is totally mutual. Yeah. The Bad Hand handout is the only email subscription that I actually read every week.
Nice.
But I read it every week. Is it Tuesday when it pops up?
Usually? Tuesday. Yeah, yep. Usually Tuesdays. Every once in a while it squeaks out on a Wednesday. Yep. But yeah, Tuesdays are the day.
Yep. Every time I have it. So they used to not go into my main inbox, and I learned how to do a rule on my Gmail so that never happened again.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's good to know too. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's your hard work does not go unappreciated.
Well, that's awesome. And, we always try to give our subscribers the early scoop on everything. Most of our news will eventually filter out on social media, but try to add a little bit of value by giving our subscribers the news first, and then try to get some kind of yummy discounts and early peaks and things like that. So I'm glad that you're enjoying it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm very much enjoying it and everything that you've been doing with Bad Hand. So Doug, we've had you on the show before, and you talked a little bit about your horror origin. You talked a little bit about Bad Hand, but we didn't really dive too deep in because we were talking Evil Dead that time. Mm-hmm. So as far as what Bad Hand Books is, in case people haven't listened to that Evil Dead episode, if you haven't, you should go back and listen to it, because
it's a great episode.
I did just recently, and I'm like, yeah, this is a good episode. But yeah, for the people that might not know what Bad Hand Books is, what is Bad Hand Books, and how did that get started?
Okay, so Bad Hand Books is an independent publisher of horror, supernatural crime, and dark fantasy fiction. And we have been in operation now for, 2 years, almost 2 years, which is crazy to think of. It has gone fast. How it started was I had spent the last, decade or so working in the small presses. Had worked with Crystal Lake Publishing, if we've got any indie horror fans. Had done a couple of anthologies that did well and built up momentum, and worked with Written Backwards as well, Michael Bailey. Oh, there's Gutted. Yeah. I'm still really proud of that one. That one's clear back from 2016.
Yeah.
So that was the second anthology that I ever worked on. So, which is crazy to think now. But just sort of did the rounds, put in my time in the small presses, and then I had sort of an unexpected separation from my employment in 2018. And during that time, you know, you're down on your luck. You have time to think about what you want your future to be. And for me, it was a lot of self-loathing. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit of a dark time, but Bad Hand books became sort of this joke I would tell myself, because I would say you can do a lot with a bad hand, and you know, just to sort of give myself an ironic pep talk, because I felt like I'd been dealt a bad hand. So I said, if I ever get back on my feet and make my own publishing business, I'm going to sort of turn this bad hand into a middle finger, and this is going to be the banner that I ride out under. So I was sort of making fun of myself with this idea, but also sort of owning my own bad luck and turning it into something that could be a useful tool for me. And so, you know, a couple of years later, I had the idea for the Hideous Book of Hidden Horrors, which was the first Bad Hand title. And the rest is history. You know, I was telling Casey that once you put the accelerator down, there's really no going back. I sort of had myself fooled that, you know, I can maybe do 1 or 2 books a year, and that's not it at all. I mean, it's been a wonderful embarrassment of riches when it comes to the opportunities that have come my way, and I try to say yes to them more than I say no. And 2 years later, here we are.
That's awesome. Like I said, because we were talking a little bit before we started the show. Sam and I are kind of in that same boat of like, maybe we don't know when to say no, and maybe there's nothing wrong with not saying no to things.
Yeah.
So for you, what's the one thing that popped up in the last two plus years that you've been doing Bad Hand that's like, I can't say no to this at all? Maybe something that was too much on your plate at the time, but you're like, I still have to say yes. I have to do this.
Gosh, it feels like every book feels that way. There, there are a couple of books that are unannounced right now that I would say I would maybe reframe it and just say the sheer volume. But there were let me give you a specific example, because it's maybe better podcasting, because I'm trying not to let anything out of the bag right now that hasn't been announced, but I'm trying to give you a good answer too. And this is the real deal. So I was looking for another title to sort of round out my 2024 schedule. And I had worked with Clay McLeod Chapman, author of What Kind of Mother and Ghost Eaters, on a couple of anthologies. So we worked on some short stories together. And I'm a big fan of his. That's usually how these things start, is I read an author's work and then I go, I gotta work with them. And so I'd sort of been reaching out to Clay saying, do you have anything longer? You know, I'm kind of looking for a novella. And there were some scheduling issues on his end that were sort of precarious for a while. But he sent me the book, Kill Your Darling. And it wasn't necessarily, because I've got Laird Barron's collection in September as well.
Yep.
And then I've got Zoya Stage's My Under Slumber Bumblebeast later on in the year. So in my mind, I was sort of full, you know, it's because I'm a one-man band here.
Right.
But I read this novella, and it's probably not the greatest attribute for a publisher, but I'm a slow reader. And I can tell you that I read this 188-page book that night in a single sitting. I just didn't stop. And to your point, Casey, or to your question, it was then that I was like, there's no way I can pass on this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know when I'm going to do it, but I've got to get this locked in somehow. And I think it's useful in some ways to be just one person because I can make those executive calls and I don't have to ask anybody for permission. But it's also, I look at my schedule because I've got a day job. I've got 4 kiddos. I've got a busy life other than Bad Hand. And I think this fall is going to be really intense. But, I had been wanting to work with Clay. The opportunity arose and the book is fantastic. It's sort of a grief horror / mystery. It feels like something that could have been like the 5th piece in different seasons. It's got that like apt pupil,
Okay.
the body. It's that vibe. There's not a lot of supernatural in it, but it's extremely soulful and beautiful and haunting and heartbreaking. And I just had to jump on it.
That's awesome. That makes me really excited to get my pre-order of that.
Actually, just approved the e-proof of it through Ingram, so that was just before I came on this podcast.
Oh,
So
awesome.
yeah.
Well, that is so exciting. So, speaking on that, how do you, I mean, you kind of answered this. How do you go about procuring like authors or specific projects that you want to publish under Bad Hand? How do you find people and connect with them and find those stories that Bad Hand can push out and yeah, give a home to?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is the right way. So let me just preface it by saying this is just how I do it. So I don't want anybody thinking when they hear me that this is the way that every small press does it or everybody should do it. But I'll return to that statement I made earlier, which is I'm a fan first. And so I publish the stuff that I really like to read. So I'll give you an example. Shortly after the Hideous Book of Hidden Horrors was almost done, I think we were just on the finish line of that. I had read the Isaiah Coleridge trilogy of novels by Laird Barron, and I just loved them. I'd worked with Laird on some horror stories for other projects, and I really loved his short fiction. This Isaiah Coleridge trilogy was something different for him. So it was more hard-boiled crime, sort of true detective vibe. And I noticed that as the trilogy of novels progressed, that it got weirder and darker, and there was more of that sort of cosmic horror coming through that and love from Laird Barron. And Isaiah Coleridge is a fantastic character. So I got done with that trilogy. I just plowed through them. And I kind of put the last one down. And being a fan, I just was like, I want more. And then I realized, well, I'm a publisher. What if I ask Laird to do some more? And it really was that simple. I reached out to him because we had worked together on a few things previously. It wasn't like a cold call, but we set up a Zoom and I asked him, I was just like, my spidey sense is just like, there's more. You were going somewhere, there's more here. And I just wanted to ask, is that true? Am I onto something? And it turned out that he had a lot more that he wanted to do with the character. And I said, well, I don't know what you have going on with your main novel series, but maybe there's like a novella that could address some in between time. You could kind of throw something like that my way. And he said that, he wanted ultimately he wanted to bring the character to Bad Hand, for the future.
Nice.
And I don't know if that's the way it'll stay forever, but it certainly wasn't something that I expected. I figured, he might throw me a bone, and we could do something kind of off to the side together, and then but the way that I spoke about the character and my passion for it, I think spoke to him. And it's just one of those things that you can't foresee. We just really vibed and we're on the same page in terms of what we wanted to see, where we wanted to go together. And before I knew it, we had like a basic plan for the next couple of years for the character. Of course, then Laird, anybody who reads Laird or knows Laird in any way knows that he went through some pretty serious health issues, which has been public, so I'm not breaking any news there. So the main plan was sort of delayed for a while, but we did get The Wind Began to Howl out, which I thought was a strong effort. But now he's recovering and we're sort of back on track. But so that's just one example. The Clay McLeod Chapman example is another one where I just approach folks with respect and as a fan and as a professional. And I just say, I would love to work with you, and here's why. And just try to be as genuine as possible with not only what I would like to see, but what I can offer. I want to make sure that I'm real. I'm a small outfit. And so I'm upfront with the ceiling in terms of my advances and what I can do financially. But I think where the success has come is that I've got a point of view when it comes to Bad Hand. And I'm able to speak to the authors in terms of how I think their work is going to fit into the broader picture of where I'm trying to go. And so I know that's a really meandering answer, but it's just sort of like what it comes down to is just talking to people, being real, and being passionate about what they're doing, showing that you understand the wavelength that they're trying to tap, and then giving them an idea of where they could take that through the Bad Hand lens.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Was that terrible?
No, that was a great answer.
I was just going to say that's a great answer, and it's something that I don't know, all of us could kind of learn a little bit from. Is just being real with people, especially in the world that we live in today, and just social media, especially on how almost fake most of everything has become. It's just sometimes all it takes is just being real and upfront and being you. So I think that's some great advice. I guess my next question leading into that, because we kind of touched on it a little bit there with Sam's question, is what's the rest of 2024 look like? What does the lineup look like for Bad Hand here through the rest of the year? We're about halfway into the year now. What's the lineup kind of look like? What can people look forward to?
Yeah. So before I go to what is in the future, I've got to plug Hailey Piper's supernatural crime novella, Cranberry Cove. And
beautiful cover.
Lynn Hansen did that. She's a wizard, and just captured the sort of like grunginess of the story in a way that I don't think anybody else could have done. But so that came out April 2nd. So it's been out for just over a month. Charging up the charts right now. We're doing a 99-cent Kindle sale, and I'm sure that by the time this airs, it'll be over. But we're finding a lot of readers. It's really cool to take a story that even a few years ago might have been kind of niche, because it's a queer, specifically trans, supernatural crime mystery detective story, and the story hinges on those themes. And it's so gratifying to see, and it's completely to Hailey's credit, with the power of her writing, that people have really latched onto it, and it's shown it's got a lot of legs. So I'm really excited to see where that one goes. Coming up in July, Sarah Reed, who published Root Rot and other grim tales with us last year, which is nominated for a Stoker. She's publishing a novel with Bad Hand called The Atropine Tree. And I actually just saw a new updated cover piece today on that, which is really exciting. It's a Gothic, it's like a Victorian Gothic haunted house novel. It's
Is this the first Bad Hand novel?
Yeah, it actually, yes, it is.
I thought so. Yeah, I have her Root Rot stories. I'm sorry, I just have a stack of Bad Hand books right off camera with me.
I love it. Yeah.
You see them, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have that one.
Make sure to hold it up nice and square.
Yeah. Just try and like beautiful cover art on all of these. The cover artists you work with are incredible, Doug.
Oh, thank you. That was Tom Brown for Root Rot. I'm working with John Colthart for Sarah Reed's The Atropine Tree. And if you're one of the folks who's been following my career at all, and I don't expect there are many, but he did the cover for Behold, Oddities, Curiosities, and Undefinable Wonders, which was an anthology that I worked on a few years ago.
You won the Bram Stoker for that one, correct?
That's right. Yep, the Bram Stoker Award. That's
Sam's one of those people right you were just mentioning. By the
way, I might be following your career, Doug. But
okay. That's great. I don't ever want to assume, right? Because we live in such fractured media, right? Everybody's kind of got their own bubble, and I never want to assume that anybody knows what Bad Hand is about or what I'm all about. So it's always a pleasant surprise when I encounter somebody that really genuinely cares. So it's really cool. I appreciate that. So Sarah Reed's The Atropine Tree is coming out in July. And the cover art is another banger. It's just going to blow you away. John has such a wonderful style and has been extremely responsive to my I try not to be a micromanager at this stage in the game where we're just making tweaks. I'm like, I just don't want him to feel like he's, moving the furniture here and then, we got to move the furniture back here. So we're kind of navigating the last little bit of that. And then the next one will be Not a Speck of Light, which is by Laird Barron. It's his first horror collection in almost a decade. So Swift to Chase was the last one. And I know a lot of Laird's readers have been waiting for this one for quite a while. It is friggin' fantastic. Like I'm as much of a Laird Barron fanboy, so it's hard for me to even be objective as his publisher. But I'm just extremely honored that he placed this with Bad Hand Books. Trevor Henderson did the cover and is going to be doing all of the interior art. And fun fact about Trevor, and I'm really excited to probably go see it this weekend, but he created all the monsters for the movie Tarot that's out in theaters right now.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, he's got this really just like nightmarish style that lends itself so well to the sort of bleakness and just darkness of Laird's work. So I just sent the collection to him earlier this week, in fact. So he's going to be getting started within the next week on concepts for that.
That's awesome.
And then after that will be Clay McLeod Chapman's Kill Your Darling, which is sort of a grief horror novella. If you've read What Kind of Mother, it's kind of got some thematic overlap with that, where there's a missing person and the story revolves around the reaction to that and the revelations that come with understanding the truth. And I'm trying not to give too much away. And then this one I would say is about the price you pay when you actually learn and are able to fill in the gaps. And sometimes, like that old line from Pet Sematary, like sometimes dead is better. It's like, sometimes not knowing is better, I think would be one of the lines that I would attribute to Kill Your Darling.
Yikes, that sounds bleak. I like that.
It's hard. It is really it messed me up. Like, I'm not gonna lie. And I don't know what that makes me, that I'm really eager to mess other people up with it, but it's so well written, and it's not gratuitous by any means. Like, that's not what I'm getting at. It's just
Mhm.
really hard. Um,
Yeah.
and so the last book that we'll be doing this year is something that's a little different. It's My Under Slumber Bumblebeast by Zoya Stage. And this one is when I say something different, if anybody has ever read her smash hit novel Baby Teeth, there was a character in the book. One of the main characters, Hannah, had a favorite book, and she was a child, and her favorite book was My Under Slumber Bumblebeast. So it's sort of a meta tie-in to this novel. And so Zoya went ahead and actually wrote this imaginary children's book, and it will actually have a tie-ins to the sequel to Baby Teeth that's coming out this August, called
Oh,
Dear
that's
Hannah,
cool.
which addresses Hannah as an adult. And so this little children's book that was pretend is now real, but it's a part of both of these novels in terms of the plot. Fully illustrated by J.E. Larson. So there's going to be dozens of illustrations. I've shared out a couple of them in the bad handout.
Yeah.
There are, I haven't even scratched the surface. It's whimsical. It's Tim Burton-esque,
Yeah.
gory-esque, and it's a huge lift. I think if I had known all the moving parts in the project, again, sometimes it's better not to know, because then you just dive in. But it's one of those projects that is, I think, going to appeal to readers of Zoya's novels, but also, just like, you don't have to know anything about those books to understand and appreciate. I think kids are going to love this book. Like, I read the book before I accepted it to my 9-year-old at the time daughter Eva, and Prue, the main character in My Under Slumber Bumblebeast, is 9 as well, so 9-year-old girl. And then Eva ended up becoming the model for Prue's illustrations,
Oh,
and so
that's
Oh,
neat.
Eva
wow.
is all over the book. So that's been kind of a fun thing too.
That's so cool. So
She's a
how
Nepo baby officially.
so you've done so many you've done novellas, you've done anthologies, you've done short fiction, you're moving into novels now with Bad Hand. Um how does your process differ between editing things like short fiction collections, even like, anthologies from different writers with very different styles? How does that compare to something that's just like a singular work from one author?
Um, Probably the amount of crying. Um, no, that's a great question. I really try to be a minimalist when it comes to editing. Um, and what I mean by that is, I'm not the type of editor who wants to get in there and exert my voice. Um, and so, regardless of the type of piece that I'm working on, I try to make sure that whatever recommendations I'm making aren't they don't subtract from what does this author sound like. So with short stories, it's always great to be concise, but if part of the vibe of that author is to be a bit wordy,
Mhm.
you have to adapt to that and let it ride. But in terms of, like, how does editing a short story differ from editing a novella to a novel? Um, my process isn't that different. I'll be
Okay.
honest.
Okay.
Um, and it's kind of my process for everything. I'm as likely to pick up the phone and call an author when I have thoughts, as I am to send a marked up Word document. And I ended up so the later parts of Clay's Kill Your Darling, there was a part that I was like, it's not quite there, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you how to get there. It was sort of like I would run up a flag about something and then maybe have a suggestion about where to go with it, but really leave it in the author's hands. And what that ended up turning into was a lunch hour not too long ago where I just sat on the phone with Clay and we talked through it. And some authors are really great at that. I was really, really gratified that Clay was up for that. Um, and there was a story in the Hideous Book of Hidden Horrors where I sat with one of the authors for a couple hours and we just talked through it. And I guess what I would say is I try to attract authors who are up for that kind of discussion.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's how I really love to work. I can send notes. I can be that kind of editor, but I often find that I feel like I'm imposing rather than figuring out what does the author really want to say here, because that's the question. It isn't
Yeah.
it isn't me trying to say this is how I think you should say it. It's getting to what are you trying to do here, and is there maybe a better way to do that?
Yeah.
And there was a story from Josh Mallerman, Dungeon Punchinello, Hideous Book of Hidden Horrors, where it was a mixture of the two. So I took a stab at going through and making a particular type of edit, but then we ended up getting on the phone for a couple hours and just talking through, okay, what are we trying to do here? What's the effect? What does the finish line look like? And then ideally what I do is just turn them loose to do that, whatever we agree on. So maybe, I hope that's not too unsatisfying, but it's like,
No.
I always feel like I'm just evading your questions, but it's
No, not at all. That's such a as someone who I like getting notes on any creative thing that I do. Like I enjoy I want people to pick my stuff apart because, but I also feel like it's almost always more productive to talk to someone in person or at least be on a phone call or something and just talk it through because you're right. Notes can sometimes just kind of feel like, well, this is what you should do, you
Mhm.
know? And
Yeah, it feels like someone's grading your homework where a
yeah.
creative process is not someone grading your homework. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like when Casey and I do, writing sessions and things, a lot of times it's just two of us pacing in a room, bouncing ideas off of each other and jotting it down and then trying to figure out okay, well, how can we make that better, And I just, yeah, that's a great way to be an editor, I guess.
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah.
And I think maybe it comes down to some of my experience in the ad agency world. Like that's how work gets done in
Yeah.
the ad agency. Like you get in a room and you pound out a draft and then you just talk about it. But I never try to. I mean, there are some things like, yeah, we're going to correct typos and whatever. We don't have a choice about those things.
Mhm.
If I notice that they've used a word 5 times in the last 20 pages, I'll flag that and just say we might consider another word. But if it's a feeling or an effect that I think that they're going for, and that calls for a deeper, different type of discussion. And I try to never be prescriptive about that. I try to be curious. Because I mean, let's be honest, these are professionals and a lot of them have been at this longer than I have.
Mhm.
And so being curious is not just a way to get to the best result, but it's a way for me to learn about this author who, I mean, hopefully I get to work with them again if all goes well. So it's ideally it's a dialogue always.
That's
I'm gonna
awesome.
kind of just straight up piggyback off what Sam was talking about because we talked about the difference between short stories, novellas, novels. Now you've written or excuse me, you're working on a children's story. Have you thought of graphic novels? That's something me and Sam talked about, because that feels like that might be the last thing you haven't touched upon yet is graphic novels. Is that something that might be in the future for Bad Hand?
I would love to do a graphic novel. And in fact, so Thomas Snagosky and Janine Atchison, who are working on Nira, which is a dark fantasy novella for Bad Hand. It's going to be fully illustrated by Tom Brown, who did the artwork for Root Rot. So we're going to be returning back to that art style. They are very heavily steeped in graphic novels. Thomas has worked on Hellboy, Young Hellboy, has worked closely with Mike Mignola on that, and is right now working with Janine on Vampirella comics. And so that was one of the reasons why I was so excited to work with that team, is because they bring so much experience in that world. And one of the reasons, if I'm hesitant about it, it's just because it's not in my wheelhouse. Not that children's books were either, but it's like graphic novel feels like a different type of lift altogether, because with a children's book, you still have, I mean, the text is the thing. It would have to function on its own without the illustrations. Like, you could publish My Under Slumber Bumblebeast without the illustrations. It wouldn't be as cool, but it would work. Whereas with a graphic novel, they just work hand in hand so much more intimately that right now it sort of intimidates me. But with someone like Thomas on my team, hopefully for future projects as well, that feels a little more doable, because I have somebody who's been through the process who can be that creative partner. Again, like, one of the things that I try to do is, as much as I try to direct, I try to learn. And so the moves that I make and the partnerships that I build are usually going somewhere. And so I think maybe that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
That's
I
cool.
love to hear that. That's so cool. I mean, obviously we're huge graphic novel fans, so to hear that might be something at least maybe to look forward to in the future. That's super exciting.
I sure would like to. Yes.
Cool.
Last question we're going to wrap this thing up with. I think it's maybe the most appropriate one we'll ask outside of Bad Hand books, because for one, you're wearing the guy's shirt right now, the god of just horror, in my opinion, Joe Bob Briggs. I'm going to ask you, what's Doug's perfect Joe Bob double feature? If someone gave you the keys to the last drive-in, what's the two movies you would program to talk about with yourself and Darcy?
It's true. I am a proud member of the Mutant Fam. Never missed the last drive-in. I love Joe Bob ever since Monster Vision days. So, Fright Night, the original.
Yes, dude. Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite, like, it might be my favorite movie. It's probably the most perfect vampire film. It just works.
I mean, The Lost Boys exists, but I'll give it to you.
Yeah. But it doesn't have Chris Sarandon.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. So that would be number one. Number two would be Shaun of the Dead. So I think that would make a really fun double feature. And, you know, you save the zaniness for Shaun of the Dead for the second feature when you've maybe had a few and you can laugh a little extra hard.
Yeah.
So and plus, like, the drive-in totals for Shaun of the Dead would be outstanding, because they would involve a cricket bat, maybe jukebox foo or queen foo.
Queen foo.
Record foo.
Foo. Yeah, I just for that alone, I think it would be there's zipper foo, you know, like the montage of him getting ready. So yeah, it would be the original Fright Night and Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah. How do you feel about the remake of Fright Night? Do you enjoy that one?
I do, but it's so hard for me to let go of my affection for the original, and I try not to be that guy, because I think there is value in revisiting those intellectual properties. But And Colin
Yeah.
Farrell does a great job.
He's so good. And Anton Yelchin just,
Yeah.
Mhm.
In
yeah,
a lot of ways, it's a different beast altogether. It just like
yeah,
it, and that's, I think, the biggest thing it has going for it is it doesn't try to be the original.
yeah.
And so I sort of enjoy it. Like, let me put it this way. So Alien Resurrection, like I don't watch it as an alien movie. I watch it because uh, uh, Joss Whedon wrote it. Um, I watch it as an ultra violent episode of Firefly that happens to have xenomorphs in it. So like when
There you
it's
go.
not a great alien movie, but it's a great episode of Firefly, right? And
That's
so like
awesome.
I don't, when I watch the remake, and I do from time to time of Fright Night, I don't necessarily watch it as Fright Night, you know, like I
Yeah,
watch it just sort of as like this is a cool vampire flick. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Because it
Mhm.
is very much its own beast, and that's why I think it's probably I think it's one of the stronger remakes from that era, just because of that, because it does something a little different, but it kind of stays true to the heart at the center of it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, maybe a little too much CGI. Like if you're remaking a movie that's known for its practical effects, I want to see a little more practicality, but
yeah.
small quibble, small
Yeah,
quibble.
yeah, that's kind of my gripe too. But Colin Farrell is, you know, he's
Yeah.
great in it as
And
Jerry.
David Tennant as Peter Vincent, like
Yeah,
Chris Angel Peter Vincent is
yeah. I
just
mean, they
great.
did some fun things with it, and yeah. So yeah,
Rad.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fright Night, Shaun of the Dead. That's a
Yeah.
Joe Bob needs to do that this season.
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
out there, Joe Bob, it's a bad hand official request.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just rewatched Shaun of the Dead like a few weeks ago. That movie's perfect. It's
It really is.
just 10 out of 10, no notes. Like just yeah.
I actually showed it to my oldest Rocco, and he just howled through the whole
Yeah.
thing. I mean, it was like, and it was cool because I didn't know whether it would translate. You know, it's from well before he was born. I hate to feel old, but it was like,
Right.
and it's British, but there's something about it that just like endears itself to everybody
Yeah,
immediately.
Mhm.
for sure. For sure.
All right. Speaking of 10 out of 10 no notes, where can people pick up some notes on where they can find Bad Hand books and put in any pre-orders for the stuff you guys got coming out for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so head over to badhandbooks.com, and we've got a drop-down menu under buy, and that will get you to the pre-orders. It gets you to ebooks. If you want to cut Bezos out of the equation, you can get ebooks straight from us. There's merch. We've got new shirts up,
Yeah.
more coming as well. And you can find us on Twitter, on Instagram. Look for Bad Hand Books. We've got a Threads account where I'm really terrible at maintaining that. It's just
Yeah.
I think we do too. I don't know if I've ever logged
We
into
do.
it.
I
don't
don't think
know.
we've ever logged in.
Yeah.
technically we've got a TikTok account, but I would say we're most active on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Uh, and if you want the bad handout, it comes out every Tuesday. So go to the contact page and send us a note with the subject line "Give me news," and you'll get bad hand goodness every week direct to your inbox.
And it's solid. Like I said, only email newsletter that I actually read every week.
Well, you're going to be happy to know, and I don't want to overextend this too much, but you'll be happy to know that I'm looking at adding some new features to that.
Oh,
So
awesome.
microfiction, possibly. We may be opening up for nonfiction, so articles. So I'm looking at ways to make that even cooler.
Oh,
Because right
that's
now
awesome.
it's mostly offers and like heads up about stuff we've got coming down the pipeline. But I would love it if we had nonfiction authors who would just write about the state of the business or movie reviews or something like that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
Look for more of that to come down the pipeline, hopefully in the coming months.
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's
That's awesome.
awesome.
And I'm just gonna plug it because I have to before we leave. Like, Doug, Cranberry Cove is my favorite Bad Hand book so far. I love this book. This is another 10 out of 10, no notes. Everybody go buy Cranberry Cove. This book is incredible. I described it to Casey as like it's got a little bit of like Goodfellas, it's got a little bit of The Shining, it's got a little Satanic Panic, it's got a little Lovecraft in there. Like, it's just this, and it's all just like that, but like trans inclusive, and it's just the coolest thing ever. I love this book. It's one of the most unique things I have ever read, and if there's one thing that I hold in high regard above everything else, it's uniqueness. And I yeah, just Doug, thanks for what you do. Thanks for publishing these, because like I've just been you've kind of single-handedly resparked my love of reading in the last year. I'm not gonna lie.
Wow. Well, thank
It's
you.
I mean that. Like, I'm not blowing smoke. I'm just like I was literally talking to my partner earlier, and she was like, yeah, it really just has been like you ordered a few Bad Hand books early last year and you just haven't stopped reading since. I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. So
Oh
yeah.
man, you just made my more than my day. That I'm really touched by that. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And not to get too heavy on it, but it's extremely meaningful for me to be able to publish that particular type of book where we are,
Yeah.
where it's not always the friendliest or most inclusive atmosphere,
Hmm.
and to see it reaching an audience and really touching people is the best thing in the world, because I think that's the cure, right? That
Yeah.
is the cure. We read stories that don't look and sound like us,
Yep.
but we learn something. I know that we're trying to wrap up, but for me as a straight white male who lives in flyover country, it was like, as much as I enjoyed the mystery, as much as I enjoyed the supernatural elements, there were those moments where I was like, oh, that's how it is.
Hmm.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And for me, that was probably more powerful than anything else in the book, because
Hmm.
I felt like it wasn't like this book is going to teach you something, but I had to stop
No.
and just go, that's what it feels like, because without giving too much away, there's a character who transitions
Hmm.
in this book, and she begins to experience sexism
Yeah.
that is also prevalent. So there's the trans marginalization, but then there's also what it means to be marginalized as a woman.
Yeah.
And this character has this moment where she's like, okay, this means that the world considers me a woman, and I both love and find that to be problematic at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so complex and rich and powerful, all against this backdrop of a really cool mystery.
Hmm.
And so I'm so glad that you have connected with that title.
Yeah. It's so good. And I can't wait to I'm pretty sure I might have every single book that you have coming out this year on pre-order. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure. It kind of just happens. Bad Hand pops into my inbox with like a new pre-order link, and I'm like, yeah.
Oh, that means so much. Yeah, and I do see
So
your orders come in, so I appreciate that.
yeah,
You're
of
my
course.
boy.
I got you. I yeah, 100% Doug, and I appreciate it. I mean, we both appreciate you coming on the show
Mhm.
and talking Bad Hand with us. We love what you're doing. It's not going unnoticed, and thanks for keeping not just horror but queer horror and just weird, dark, cosmic horror alive in South Dakota. This is so
Mhm.
cool.
It's my pleasure and privilege, and I'm so thrilled to be able to do it. Every day I get to do this is just it's a dream. I love it. I care about it. I care about the people I work with, and I want to keep thrilling you, so I'm going to keep giving it hell.
Awesome.
Well, let's kind of wrap this thing up here. We're so excited for everything you have coming up, and thank you again for just taking time out to talk, with us for an hour and talk about what you're doing. And again, this episode alone was just very insightful, inspiring, and
Yeah.
I hope our listeners get something out of it as well, and they go visit Bad Hand Books and pick up one of these titles as well. And give them a chance. So, Doug, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Casey.